Hi, this is Lisa and Todd with the Neural Alignment Model, and this is video number 2 on the fear of losing a child. In the first video, we talked about anthropologically and hunter-gatherers, how losing a child is based biologically, scientifically, neuroscience on wanting your offspring to survive, having parts of you biologically move forward and keep going in society. And then we talked about mom's roles and dad's roles, and how moms do certain things and dads do certain things. So you'll be able to find that video on our YouTube page, and really, if you've missed the first video, get into that. And we talked about loss of a child emotionally as well. In this video, we're going to talk a little bit, we're going to get into a little bit about some more biology stuff. We're going to get a little bit more into the hunter-gatherer anthropologically, and then we're going to talk about, is loss of a child actually a band-aid fear, and what the deeper fear is, and then we're going to tie it back into how society is much more prone to addiction now. So hi, Todd, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Lisa. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too. So we were talking about in hunter-gatherer societies.
Can I interrupt?
Yes.
I've just been thinking about this when we were talking about this yesterday. Then I started to think about this fear of a loss of your child, and none of my children have died, thank God. But it made me think I actually have lost all 3 of my children, just temporarily. So briefly, have you ever put your kid in the car seat and started to pull away while they were still in the car seat on the curb, on the sidewalk?
Yes.
Have you actually done that? Okay, I'm not alone. Literally started to pull away and went, I am a horrible person. My child is on the sidewalk. So that was with Sophia.
Yeah.
Then with Ellie, one of the games, Dum Dum, this is so interesting when we talk about survival. One of the games I used to play with her, and I don't know where this came from, but I played with my kids, is hiding. Where do we get hide and seek from? Well, teaching your kid how to hide was so important for survival.
Yep. And that's what their dad does with them 4 or 5 times a week. Like that, they play hide and seek. They want
right, and to hide well. Don't make a peep. Don't make a peep. I got to go on and tell you more about this because it's so fascinating now that we brought this up and it's percolating, all these memories that are coming back. But I taught Ellie to hide and keep quiet so well that one day we went into this fitness gym and we were thinking about signing up, and she was, let's say, 2.5 years old.
Yeah.
And it seemed like she was beside us. We were talking to the lady at the counter. We're talking about signing up, what the cost was. And it seemed like maybe 5 or 10 seconds. And, as a parent, you're always double checking, right? Oh, still there. Okay. And she was gone. And we were looking around and I'm like, oh my God, my daughter's gone. And so Stacy's there with me. And, it's amazing, the feeling of panic.
Yep.
That compares to nothing else to reinforce this deepest fear of ours. And that panic just floods. It's like, oh my God, my baby could be kidnapped. My baby could be dead. Like, oh my God. But you're still going to find, it's probably not true. They're probably okay. They wandered off. But still, you get that horrible feeling. And so first thing I did is I'm not shy. And I yelled for her. I'm like, Ellie, are you here? Ellie, this is not a joke. Don't play. Not a peep. So I sprint up the stairs and I go out onto the street. And there's no sign of her. Yeah. So now my thought of her being abducted. Yeah. Because if she was just walking away, she doesn't walk fast. She's 3 years old, so she's going to be close, and I would have seen her. So now it's, oh my God, she's been abducted. And then I run back downstairs and I think, okay, really, come on. Nobody came down here. She couldn't have gone up. And then we started looking around. We went through the whole gym, screaming and hollering. And I knew that I had taught her to hide well. So I was like, baby, if you're hiding, don't hide right now. Daddy's being really serious. Yeah. And then we ran back upstairs again and started looking around upstairs and panicked, going up to people. Did you see a little girl? Did you see a little girl? Like, Oh, we've all been through this, right?
Yeah.
I hope I'm not alone. We went back downstairs, and finally, I don't remember exactly how it came up. She stepped into one of the bigger lockers and closed the door and just had this look on her face like,
yeah,
I'm proud. You couldn't find me.
yeah,
I didn't know what to do.
yeah,
Obviously spoke to her about, when daddy says the word seriously,
yeah,
it means we're not playing anymore.
yeah,
And so then you got to reveal yourself. And then that word seriously became a big part of our parenting moving forward. So even if I was tickling them, they could go, seriously, daddy, boom, and I would stop right away. So whenever we said seriously, and then Mackenzie once on the beach, same sort of a thing. Turn around, we just meet these two people we knew from before. We're talking for what seems like 10, 15 seconds. Gone.
Yeah.
Gone. Ran up the hill. Oh, it was just so awful. So anyways, we actually used to play games with our kids. Yeah. Once these types of things happened, I would test the kids. And I would actually go and talk to a random stranger and say, listen, can you offer my kids some candy? Yeah. And then just see if they'll walk away with you. Because I talk to them about this stuff all the time. Yeah. This should actually be a parenting course that we're doing right now. But to actually prepare your kids. Yes. And somebody might come up and be really friendly or maybe they're in the library and say, hey, can you help me find a book? Or so we'll do all these different scenarios. Yeah. Where it might be possible that a random stranger could just try and talk you into going away. Or my son, who was already into like cool skateboarding things. And I got this guy to say, hey, I've got these really cool stickers in my car. You want to see them? Okay, so my girls never fell for it. Yeah. Everyone that I talked into trying to abduct them, my girls are like, well, I got to ask my mommy and daddy. Yeah. My son's like, stickers? Yeah. and off he goes. Right? Yeah. We're watching. I'm like, oh, there's a dead boy. Yeah. Dead boy walking. Great. Good to know. And 2 or 3 more times with other things that we tested him with, off he went. Yeah. That boy was easy pickings. Anyways, I just wanted to bring that up because when you actually think about it, even when you've had some sort of thing that was close and that overwhelming feeling, it just sort of reinforces why it's our deepest fear. Like I can't think of anything worse, really. Yeah. Can't think of anything worse. Anyway, sorry that I went off track there, but I just wanted to share those personal stories in a way that make it sort of relatable for people. Yeah. Because I think sometimes people feel so guilty about things that they don't think are relatively normal experiences. Mm-hmm.
No, we've all had experiences, not picking up your kid from school, totally forgetting they exist. Going out, the kids are playing outside and you lock all the doors and you're doing something and then you're like, oh, where's my children? Yeah.
Good. Yeah. I'm not alone. So nor are you guys.
Yeah. No, everybody has done something. And then you get that fear. And this actual conversation will tie in just a bit because it goes to the deeper fears. So talk to me about in a hunter-gatherer society, when there was a baby, how many different types of cries approximately were there? Did a mother know?
Yeah, I mean, I think we don't know this for sure, but it seems like scientists have discovered that there were 8 different types of cries. Mm-hmm. And each one of those cries, I don't remember off the top of my head, but would be something like, I'm hungry, I'm afraid, I'm tired, I'm in pain, I'm scared. But each of them would have a very specific intent in terms of communicating to your parents, because babies really only had crying and then looking cute and going goo goo gaga. I mean, but in terms of their need, when we think about our model and we talk about this term of non-homeostasis, well, when a baby was non-homeostatic or out of balance in some way, hungry, tired, this, that, well, its only way of communicating was through crying.
Yes.
Now, hunter-gatherer mothers, and I would assume fathers, but we know mothers for sure, as soon as that particular type of cry, that unique type of cry, that one of 8 different types, as soon as the baby engaged in that process, the mother knew instantly. Now, why is that so important?
They knew instantly what was wrong. So they knew it meant diaper change, or they knew it meant gas. It wasn't like in today's society where as a parent you're like, oh, they're crying, shit, what do I do? Okay, check the diaper, no. Gas, no. Rub their tummy, no, that didn't. And it's like a hit and miss scenario.
Well, and again, I never want any mother or father to feel guilty about this, because it's endemic in our culture now. We're collectively disconnected. And the more the culture progresses, the more things present themselves that disconnect us. So we've lost these tools, we've lost these abilities. Now, some moms and some dads are seemingly, inherently, it seems, or circumstantially, or through conditioning, still have that better ability, that they'll get it on the first or second or third try. Mm-hmm. Whereas some moms and dads, literally they'll cycle through all 8.
Yeah.
But because they took so long to get to the real issue, it's more than that issue now. Because now I'm in survival mode. Now I'm just crying because I feel like I'm in danger. I feel like I can't communicate with you. And that's a bad thing.
That's a bad thing. In a
hunter-gatherer band, if I couldn't communicate with you, the probability of my survival went way down.
And we had talked about this the other day, you and I, about how, as a parent, after you had your first one, the second one, you caught on quicker. By the third one, you're like, I know what that means, right? And so the baby's needs were actually met quicker by the third one. And usually the second or third child is much calmer than the first child. They tend to have less anxiety. They tend, in generally speaking, to not be as afraid as their older siblings, because we really know what we were doing. And I was talking to you about like how this is not just a human phenomenon. When you take animals and put them in a zoo and you take them away from their group community dynamic, whether you're talking about hippos or giraffes, gorillas, pandas, whatever, elephants, and they've never been around a group that has had babies, the zookeepers have to raise the babies for a bit because the moms don't know what to do.
Right.
No idea. And I know as a first-time mom, I had zero support, none. And I had no idea what to do. I was like totally hit and miss. And my daughter has massive anxiety, which is a direct result of me being super anxious. My second daughter, not so much. I was like, I know what that is. Oh, I'm not going to get up with this. This isn't a big deal. But on everything was survival mode for me.
Yeah.
Consequently, she lives in survival mode. It's getting better, but that's really how she lives, because that's how she was trained, unfortunately, by me to be. And so you were
but to be fair to you, there's also the impact of the existing cultural milieu.
Yes.
That sort of tells you, in a sense, not just what would be your addictive tendencies or your proclivities, but then there can be a collective cultural imbalance where the entire culture is doing something really not in the most effective way. And yet everybody else is doing it. You see that, and then you feel compelled that if I'm going to be a good mom, that I have to do it that way too.
Because if you have no other community group or family group that shows you different, you're going to look out at the movies. You're going to look out at moms around you. You're going to look in your community. You're going to look at, popular culture and go, what's everybody else doing? Maybe I can find my information here because I can't get it from a closer family source.
Right.
And then you pick up on all these things, because you were saying in the hunter-gatherer societies, those babies would have been cared for instantly.
Yeah.
None of this, leave them to cry it out.
Right.
Leave them for 3 or 4 hours until and what happens to a baby when you leave them to cry in a crib for like an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours? What happens? Well,
it's such an important thing, especially as it relates to mental health and addiction behavior later on in life. So what ends up inevitably happening is they start to feel like, I don't matter.
Yeah.
And you could be the most loving parent in the world, but if you have adopted this sort of parenting strategy, even though a child, as they grow up and develop later on, because you're so loving, intellectually they would know that they would know that they're loved.
Yeah.
But when they really get down to it, because they don't feel safe, because they've adopted or been imprinted in this way that that their communication wasn't responded to in a way that let them know that they were safe. Well, what starts to happen when you don't feel safe is you don't feel loved. Now, you know you're loved intellectually, you just don't feel loved because you don't feel safe. And more often than not, you kind of blame your mom, and you'll blame her randomly because you don't know this model. And so you're not going to specifically say, you didn't make me feel safe and you didn't make me feel loved, and that's why I'm feeling angry at you.
Yeah.
But what also happens is that these kids pick up what we call addictive or pseudo attachments. So what that really means is, so hunter-gatherer moms, because they could understand the cries, they could communicate perfectly with their children, then it presents an opportunity when that child is in non-homeostasis for that mother to attach or to connect in a way that we call authentic attachment, that then would provide that need. And then along with that, a bunch of other things started happening in terms of my worth, my value, my ability to discern truth, my all of these types of things. And so I have those authentic attachments, and then I come back into homeostasis, but it creates, most importantly, sort of a template, a behavioral, physiologically reinforced template. And so if I don't get an authentic attachment, then I instead, let's say you leave me to cry in the crib for 2 hours because you don't want to spoil the baby. Well, I stop crying at some point, and then you assume that it worked. But what I did instead is that I attached to my blankie or to a stuffed toy or to my binky. But I also attached to certain emotions and feelings. And depending on my age, that's where I might have first attached to not feeling safe, not feeling protected, or not feeling loved. I might not have been able to internalize that or create a narrative around that yet, but the feelings are there. Now, what's hard to understand is that we actually unconsciously get addicted to those feelings, to those emotions. Mm-hmm. And so as I'm addicted to not feeling worthy or not feeling safe, I start to, as I grow and evolve and develop, I start to come up with the reasons why I must be feeling this way. And then whatever is presented in the cultural narrative is easy for me to pick up as the explanation for why.
Well, and that's why with a lot of my clients, I'll take them back to childhood really early. And then I'll bring them back to stuff they probably don't remember and say, well, look at these things, like from your model. Where you left, did your parents leave you to cry? You've been in survival mode from the beginning because, and it's judgment. It's not a blame and shame game.
Right.
But this is what's happened because in hunter-gatherer societies, if the mom happened to be, going to the bathroom, an aunt would pick up the baby and know instantly. The baby
That's right.
would always be looked after. And yet we're taught, like I know I was taught, leave the baby in the crib. Let them cry it out. That's the way you'll get sleep. And it's wrong. And all the moms I talked to, it felt like you were killing your child. And I know my husband felt like that. But then we went along with it because that was what you did. That was culture. And so we were just talking about, it feels like we've completely flipped to creating traumas on purpose without even realizing we're doing this.
Right. Yeah. This is one of the things that sort of evolutionary psychologists and some anthropologists call evolutionary mismatch. Mm-hmm. Is that our culture today is just so fundamentally different from the way that we evolved. Yes. That we're being engaged and raised and treated in ways that are so profoundly different that those differences, because our biology was reinforcing different outcomes and different processes before, that just those differences by themselves create a large percentage of our dysfunction today. And so you could take a look at a variety of different things, from diet, how it's so fundamentally different, how we raise our children, fundamentally different. I mean, think about this. The idea of leaving your child in another room as a hunter-gatherer, the idea that your child wouldn't be in between the mother and the father, or right next to the mother and father, is preposterous. Of course the child would have been there, or the probability of a predator coming into the camp at night and scooping that kid off and running away was just too high. Yeah. And so now we have these real challenges where we're confronted with what we think might be the right way to raise our kids. And so people are saying, no, they have to be in their crib in a separate room. And we just don't get that that's terrifying for a child.
Well,
And so
and
maybe
then the people who do the parenting where their kids are close to them and they are in the same room and they have them on their back all the time and stuff, they get shunned by society for doing things,
right,
anthropologically speaking, were normal.
yeah. The good news is that especially women, there's a lot of women that don't care
Yeah,
what
and
society
it's changing.
says.
Absolutely.
And they have a voice, and they're just getting back to trusting their instincts.
Yeah.
And they don't care that some man wrote a book to mansplain how you're supposed to, as a mother, be interacting with your child. And they know somehow deep down in their core that baby's supposed to be with them. And the irony, in a sense, is like, for example, we almost call it the rule of opposites. There's so many things that we do today that really are the opposite of our programming. They're the opposite of our survival. And it's not totally coincidental, but it's too complex to get into in terms of what's driving and compelling those behaviors. But for example, we talked about this age 0 to 6 in a hunter-gatherer band, that if you would get past the age of 5 or 6, well, the probability of your survival would just increase dramatically. And so somehow, again, mothers knew that. And so little children were always watched. We're always close to somebody. We're always provided for. We're always prioritized. And if not by the mother, somebody else in the band was there and ready, watching, able, capable of looking after, providing whatever that child needed.
Yeah.
Well, what we do with babies is the opposite. We want to toughen them up. And then the ultimate irony is that by the age of 5 or 6, hunter-gatherers let their kids explore. They let them fall down. They let them get close to a spider. They let them, in a way where inevitably they have to learn these experiences or they're going to die. They won't be autonomous. They won't be independent. And so this is when kindergarten, grade 1, this is when parents in a hunter-gatherer band would be letting go. But now, because the kids are sort of over-attached in a sense, and they've got these addictive templates already, they don't feel safe already because they haven't been healthily attached. Now they have a panic when they go to preschool or to kindergarten. And so now the parents start to get conditioned to overprotecting and hovering. And now when hunter-gatherer babies are being allowed to experience and explore because they have that sense of security and stability already.
We're going, don't eat that. Don't climb on that. Don't do this. You're going to get hurt. Don't put...
That's right. That's right. So we got helicopter parents just floating around, and now it's 5 or 6 or 7 years old, and not allowing our kids to experience.
And the kids biologically know they should be exploring, and they're fighting us, and we're fighting. Like, it's just a totally mismatch, high stress for everybody because we're always going against our natural instincts.
That's right.
It explains a whole lot of why there's so much more addiction to everything. Like, everything's an addiction now. So we were talking about in the last video about how if a dad leaves, they're 4 times more likely to die in 100 societies, and if a mom leaves, it's 12 or 20%. But you have another statistic which ties into high stress. So tell me about that.
Well, it's fascinating. And again, this is why I feel like it's so important for people to get that survival, or the things that would enhance survival, and it's our always trying to improve our survivability or survivability quotient, that is the driver of all of those aspects of human behavior, the way that we relate with each other, the way that we hunt, the way that we parent, the way that everything we did, all of those things were done primarily, not because we were playing a role or had an identity or some archetype needed to be played out. It's just because it gave us the best odds of surviving. That's it. And we can create any narrative or story we want to help explain it, and archetypes are great at helping us do that. But everything is about survival. Mm-hmm. And so to sort of reinforce that, this is super important, and I think also so interesting. So we talked about if a father stopped providing care or abandoned or was killed in a hunter-gatherer band, that child, we know statistically, was about 4 times more likely to die. And then if the mother got killed or stopped providing care for a child, that child was 12 to 20 times more likely to die. Well, what's fantastic and shocking and surprising is that in a modern world today, if a father stops providing care or abandons his family, we can actually measure parts of the survival centers of the brain, but specifically the stress response and the chemical that we associate with stress the most, which is cortisol. And we can measure that cortisol and directly correlate it to our survivability or lack thereof is the same correlation with how much cortisol goes up. And so when a father stops providing care today or dies, that child's cortisol levels go up 4 times, directly related to the 4 times of the probability of death. And if a mother stops providing care for whatever reason, maybe death, the child's cortisol levels go up 12 to 20 times. Now, why is this so important? Because we also see a causation and direct correlation between specifically cortisol levels, and we can measure other stress hormones as well, but specifically cortisol levels and the predictability or the likelihood of mental illness, neuroses, or drug and alcohol addiction, directly correlated to how high your cortisol level is.
Well, and if you look at everything, everybody is saying kids are so stressed out nowadays. Kids are so stressed. Everyone's stressed. The society is stressed, but the kids are super stressed. Well, look at a mom who's always on her iPhone. That is saying to a child, you've abandoned me. You're not interacting with me. I have to scream, cry, punch you before you actually pay attention. So the first time I ask you something, you don't listen. The 45th time I punch you, and then you go, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
So by then, they're fully in survival mode. They feel like they've been abandoned. Their stress level has gone through the roof. And because technology is so addictive, moms, I was walking down the street the other day, and there was a mom with a 3-year-old. The little girl's on her bike, and the mom never looked up from her phone once. Even when I walked by and said hello, it was like, eh. And her little girl's talking at her, and mom, look at this, and do this. And the mom never once looked at that child. And I'm not blaming the mom.
Right.
This is a societal addiction. Dads are doing it.
Yes.
And it's not just iPhones.
No.
I said to my husband, do you remember our dads reading the newspaper or our moms? Everybody, don't bother your dad when he's reading the newspaper. Don't
right.
Your grandfather. Your mom's watching soap operas. It's a culture of disconnection, addictive disconnection.
Well, and that's always what addiction leads to, is deeper types of disconnection. But you've heard the saying, again, here we are, we sort of justify and we make up these cliches to explain sort of different dynamics and interactions and behavioral patterns. And so you've heard the saying before that bad attention for a child is better than no attention. Well, it seems sort of counterintuitive in a way. Why would the child want to get disciplined? Like, why would you act that way, little Johnny? You know that you're going to get put in the corner. You know you're going to get a spank, and you know you're going to get some sort of admonishment or some sort of corrective measure.
Yeah.
But what the parents don't understand is that no attention is one of the biggest traumas of all. Because to a hunter-gatherer baby, to not be seen, to not have an awareness that you know exactly where I am, that you're there, you're engaged with me, means, wow, I could die like that. You're just not paying attention. So absolutely, it's a good survival strategy for a child to get bad attention. If that's the only way it can get attention, at least I'm seen. At least I know you know where I am, and I'm in your face, and I'm getting in trouble, and no, I don't like it. Don't think that I like it, but I can't get enough attention.
Yes. And even when you get into adulthood and you look at the increased rise of problems and anger and, people being aggressive with each other, people behaving badly, looking for attention in bad ways because they never felt seen or heard or any of these things. So any attention is better than no attention, but it takes it back to how our society has flipped.
Yeah.
We're we've disconnected right at early childhood, and that's considered the norm. But then look at all these addictive tendencies. So that's what we're trying to get across to people in these videos. It's why addiction is so prevalent right now. And we're not just talking drug and alcohol addiction. We're talking addiction to stress, addiction to overload, addiction to technology, addiction to poor me, to martyrs. Why is there so much? Well, it's because we've flipped.
Well, and Lisa, we're not going to go. Oh, sorry.
Stress in our children.
Right.
Stress in our children at the age of babies, and we don't even realize it. And that's why it gets worse. Like we said, you said long term. The more addiction runs in your life, the deeper into addiction you get.
Yeah. Well, it's a really powerful and simple way to have an indicator about how dysfunctional or how addicted we are as a society, or as a family, or as an individual.
Yeah.
And we're never going to go back to hunter-gatherer life, of course, even though there's a part of us that feels called to that. People want to simplify and they go out and move into the woods and whatever. Yeah. But we'll never be able to do it like hunter-gatherers did it ever again in some ways. For example, the food's just changed. It's different. Yeah. So even when we look at a banana now and versus a banana that a hunter-gatherer would have eaten, well, a hunter-gatherer banana seeds were this big. We found a way to, gene splice those seeds out of everything, and to get juicy, sweet meat, which, again, hunter-gatherers didn't have. But when you think about the things that you can change, this is super cool, because what a simplified way of moving back towards health. So this deeper connection, this presence and awareness, looking after and being available for young children and allowing older children to sort of venture off on their own to a certain degree. But even if you take a look at the way that we play, we do that backwards. So we've turned play into competition after a certain age. By the time they're 4, they've joined their first soccer team or dance or this or that, and now they're competing, which isn't play anymore. They play before class and they play after class, but class isn't playing. So we're starting to breed up play. So hunter-gatherer play, which is so healthy, is what we call playing with abandon, with no purpose other than joy and connection, and playing in a way that would be lessons of survival. And so competition in that sense wasn't really connected to play, even though hunter-gatherers would do certain types of things that would be seen as competitive, but that would also enhance survival. Yeah. Contributing to your family, to the band, it was so important. We have actually found ways to rob our children of altruism, inherent compassion and empathy. The things that we do in terms of supplying extrinsic rewards versus intrinsic take altruistic and empathetic sort of tendencies out of our kids. Yep. And we educate in the exact opposite way that hunter-gatherers learned. They were inquisitive and they would come to try and learn, and then you would just be modeling. If you were doing some ceramics or you were carving something out of wood or whatever, you would just keep doing it, and then they might come and observe and maybe ask questions, and that's how you would teach. And I could go on: the parenting, the education, the play, the way we worked, the way we connected, the way it's almost like we're doing everything backwards. Exactly. And you can actually tell when I'm working with the client and they don't think that they have traditional addictions. And so maybe they have an anxiety disorder, maybe they have an eating disorder, or some other sort of out of balance state, or maybe they're in constant conflict, or they haven't had intimacy in their relationship in 2 years, or whatever. I can take a look at all the things that a hunter-gatherer band has evolved to do that's been driven by survival, emotionally, somatically, cognitively, and physiologically reinforced as a positive thing. And you can take a look at those things. So let's give you an example. Yeah, so when I'm working with a client, I can actually tell whether they have an anxiety problem or a depression or a conflict in a relationship, or they haven't had intimacy in years. For me, there's a way to measure that I think is so valuable: the depth of somebody's dysfunction. because they might not even know the depth of their dysfunction. Do they have a scale that they can put it on? How out of balance are they? How much pain are they really in? Because everything's relative. And so there's actually a really good way to measure that. And you take a look at, if this is baseline, and you take a look at all the things that we evolved that were critical for survival. So here's an example. So my sex life, of course, sex is critical for survival. So if I have a healthy sex life, that's an indicator, especially a healthy sex life in terms of what hunter-gatherer sex would have been like. Okay, what is my relationship with food like? What is my ability to still engage in playing with abandon? What is my feeling about my work? Is it meaningful? Am I contributing? Do I give back to my tribe, to my family? Not in a way that's obsessive or compulsive or guilt-driven, but where I feel the reward and the payoff of that. Do I have some version of artistic expression? Am I aware of my specific talents and abilities and expressing those? Do I connect in a meaningful way with nature? Do I isolate, or am I really good at socializing? Do I feel filled up and supported by people around me? Do I feel a sense of purpose? Do I feel a sense of passion connected to something? Do I feel some sort of connection with spirit or spirituality or God? Whatever that might mean for you. And the list goes on. But as I take a look at all of these things that were critical for survival that a hunter-gatherer would have had a good relationship with, to the degree that I'm working with an individual or a family that they don't. So no, their sex life is a mess. No, their eating patterns are off. It's way too much sugar. I'm addicted to this. No, I don't feel fulfilled at work anymore. No, I haven't played really and felt the joy of play in the longest time. I can't even remember the last time I just got on the swing for no reason at all. No, I don't pursue my artistic expression anymore. Well, and go on. Well, you're very addicted. See, that's the predictor, because addiction hijacks the survival centers of the brain. And if everything we do is about survival, well, all of these are survival reinforcers. And the fact that you're in alignment would be demonstrated by your ability to do these things. Yes, I sleep great. Yes, I have great sex. Yes, I have healthy body image and healthy food. Yes, 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 yes to all of these things. Well, then great. That's also proof that not only will you be healthy, lack mental illness, have good relationships, but you'll be happy.
Yes.
That we can actually draw a connection and correlation between these things, not just for your health, but your happiness.
Yeah.
What a simple way to monitor.
Yeah.
And so, but also in terms of corrective measures.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, we need to work on intimacy with you and your spouse. Oh, okay. Well, then let's take a look at your diet and the things that you're eating and see if we can find something that's more sustaining, more supportive. Oh, okay. Well, then let's find a meaningful job. And if you can't get a meaningful job, let's find something purposeful so that you can contribute outside of your job. Oh, okay. Well, you haven't been in nature, so we can correct things. And all of those things are a part of our operating system. And you take a look at those things. I sort of like draw this circle on my chest. Each of those things we call authentic attachments. So those are, when you hear me use the term, or Lisa and I either use the term of a pseudo attachment or addictive attachment or a false attachment, we're not talking about any of those things typically.
No, like like to take it back to the baby example. An authentic attachment would be the mom picking the baby up. A pseudo attachment, dysfunctional attachment, is the binky.
That's right, Lisa. And this is the critical piece, is that you actually create a template for either adopting pseudo addictive or false attachments or authentic attachments. If the baby starts creating a template where the binky satiated him, that baby has adopted or is starting to adopt an addictive attachment, which provides, generally speaking, in a lot of cases for certain types of traumas, more of an instant gratification. Like one addictive attachment would be alcohol or drugs. So that can take appear to take my pain away, or my discomfort or my survival mode away much more quickly than a hug or love or support or a phone call from a friend or yoga or working out in nature or whatever. And so because they adopted the addictive template, they also adopted a need for instant gratification.
Yeah.
And so now when they try to connect with people, it's frustrating. They don't like it. I prefer to be alone. I think I'm an introvert. Or now when they go out in nature, it's like, just like I'm an indoorsy person or whatever. Now when they're trying to socialize, they isolate. Now when they're eating these types of foods, they eat crap. It's like, because they unconsciously get pulled and called to these different types of payoffs, these addictive payoffs, but the template was set with childhood traumas, and most of those traumas are traumas that we didn't see, and they're traumas that we wouldn't even acknowledge or recognize or identify as a trauma.
So then that takes us into talking about the Band-Aid fear. And I know a lot of people are going to probably bristle a little bit about loss of a child would be a Band-Aid fear. But when Todd and I got talking about it, and I kept pushing deeper and deeper, emotionally going beyond the science, going beyond the anthropology, it came to failure. It was a fear of failing as a parent, as a person. You failed biologically. You failed to bring your child to a certain age. You failed your responsibilities. You failed at everything.
Mm-hmm.
So really, the Band-Aid fear is failure, which ties into survival mode. If I'm failing at life, I'm in survival mode. And so because we've had so many traumas as little tiny children, as babies, we're always in survival mode. Therefore, we always think we're failing.
Yeah.
And so the bigger fear and the bigger bombshell is society in general and everyone has a fear of failure. I'm failing in my relationships. I'm failing as a parent. I'm failing as a mother. I'm failing as a friend. I'm failing in my jobs. And this creates addiction because the fear of failure and then proving to yourself you're failing creates deeper and deeper and deeper addictions.
Yeah. So it's like, I'm not good enough. The internal dialogue can vary from, I can't do that, I won't succeed, I'm going to fail. But it could sound something very different. You're a loser. You're stupid. You're a piece of shit. I hate you. I mean, it can be really toxic, vitriol, self-directed. And of course, again, yes, it feels so true in the body because, and this is hard to understand, because even though I have a rational brain and my rational brain can try and keep pointing me towards the direction of truth, when my body gets hijacked by addiction, remember the survival centers of my brain and thus my body feel, in a sense, this general malaise, this angst, this uncomfortableness is just different degrees of, oh, I'm going to die. Now we come up with a different story. We say, no, I'm feeling this, or I'm feeling anxiety, or I'm feeling that. But the hunter-gatherer would tune into the body so much more acutely and go, oh, there's a survival threat. Where's the bear? And of course, there's no bear now. There's just addiction.
That's right. And to do kind of like a generalized kind of look at the core traumas of a child and then getting to someone who's my age and saying, well, my deepest fear is a loss of a child. Well, if their parent, my mom, was put in a crib and not, cared, looked after right away when something went wrong,
right,
she's in survival mode, and she'll be in survival mode her whole life because, the grandparent was not always paying attention, not always there, was because society told you shouldn't be picking up your kid all the time. So then
and also, Lisa, don't forget, when we go back far enough, some part of that societal norm kind of came from homesteaders and parents that worked 15, 16 hours a day for survival. They kind of had to neglect their kids in a sense.
Yeah.
They were in a log cabin. They were in something that was sort of safe enough. There was food that they would eat. And so real survival sort of trumped, in terms of necessity, what a child would feel like was some sort of a survival threat.
That also comes from the loss of community, loss of tribe, because they were on their own, one family in the middle of nowhere kind of thing. So the breakdown of
Right.
the community, of the group, the loss of having the grandparents around or things like that. And so then,
Right.
you have the parents, the grandparents, the great-great-grandparents who've always been in survival mode. And we know with epigenetics, it passes down. Traumas pass down. And then they keep being repeated because of societal norms. So I have all those traumas being passed down to me. And then I, as a child, same society, leave your children, let them cry it to sleep, even if it took 6 hours, whatever. So that I'm always in survival mode. And the fear of failure is passed down, and the fear of failure gets stronger. And I can see that in my daughter. The anxiety is, I'm going to fail. I'm not going to be, I failed at art. I failed at tying my shoe. I failed at climbing a tree. I failed. And it's just this, I failed. And look at it now. And before, I would take it personally and go, what did I do wrong? See, that's the first thing we were talking about with parents.
Right. What did I do wrong?
My kid yells at me and tells me they hate me, and I go, oh, what did I do wrong? Which is saying I have failed.
Yeah.
Some way.
Yes.
It's this fear of failure. If you look at all the addictions that you and I coach and help people through, it's like number 2.
Yeah.
In fear, main in all of society, fear of failure.
Yeah. What did I do wrong? Yeah. No, and it's such a sad thing in a sense too, because again, when we start to have these feelings, we start to create a narrative, and we start to adopt an identity. We start to adopt belief systems, and those belief systems will be not necessarily self-effacing, but self-deprecating.
Well, and you reinforce, right? When you have that narrative, like, oh, my kid fell down and they hit the corner of the drywall and got a scar. I failed because I didn't whatever. But then we create the narrative, and then our brain, because it's computer, pulls up all the times we failed to reinforce, I'm a failure. I'm a bad parent. Yeah. Catch myself saying that. I'll be like, my dogs bark at me, and I'm like, oh, yes, they're telling me I'm such a bad mom. And I'm like, what? And I must say it 17 times a day.
It's so deeply ingrained. Yeah. No, it's so deeply ingrained. And you can tell that it's a real issue, because when your children aren't thriving, the level of embarrassment that these parents have when they come to me and they start telling me the stories. Now, some parents have gotten to the point where, of course, they're not cool with it, but they're comfortable with the fact that they didn't have to be perfect. Somehow they came to the point where they understood that they were trying their best. Somehow they learned something where they didn't start to self-flagellate and beat themselves up. But you can still feel that, oh, I failed. You can still feel the guilt. You can still feel the embarrassment. And you can also see the other side of it, where parents feel this desperate need to share when their kid is thriving, and they're living vicariously through their children, not because, in a sense, that they're really celebrating their child's success. They're sharing it, and what they're saying is, I succeeded. I'm a good parent. Look at what I've done. Shouldn't I be proud of myself? And they're
it's because they feel that so much of their life they failed, that when they actually do hit a good moment, it gets blown out of proportion.
Yeah, which also then ends up putting a ton of pressure on the kids. Now they see how invested you are in them achieving and accomplishing certain things, that whether they're aware of it or not, it can actually compel them, drive them, motivate them to do things and move in certain directions or behaviors in their life to please their parents, so their parents can feel like they're not failures. And so then all of a sudden I'm 40 years old and I realize I'm doing something I have very little interest in. I'm believing things I don't think I really believe. I'm supporting narratives and agendas that aren't really mine. They're my parents and my cultures and my religions. And so this is why people grow up not knowing who they are. And this comes full circle into the deepest purpose and intention of your addiction, which above everything else, it wants to prevent you from being able to uncover and discover and align your behavior with, on the very deepest levels, the beauty, the magnificence with which you are, your being, not your doing, not your accomplishments, but who you really are, knowing that and living out of that deep expression. And so this sort of explains how everything in society seems to be operating the opposite of the way that it should. Treatment centers, opposite. Education, opposite. So many parts of the medical model, opposite. Like corporations, opposite, in a way where it's just tearing down the fabric of our humanity and perpetuating all of these different types of collective cultural narratives that really are addictions.
That's right. And so what you're trying to do, what I'm trying to do and help you, is to give people the knowledge, because knowledge is power. If you understand why you're acting the way you are, how addiction is formed, why certain things have happened, it's not so you can blame your ancestors. It's so you can understand the stories we tell ourselves, which are told by the addiction persona, to keep you in that narrative. And once you are aware of it and admit it, in the next 2 videos, we're going to talk about how you can notice the triggers, what the cost of it is. So the fear of failure. What is the cost of, and look at it around the cost of the loss of a child. Like, what is it creating? Hover parenting. Is it creating you being overprotective? Is it creating you, stifling your child because you're so afraid of the fear of failure, which you the fear of loss of a child, but really it's a fear of failure, as we point out. So once you begin to understand these things, it's so much easier to rewire your brain, because you can forgive, you can understand, and you can move to authentic attachment. So that's what we're going to be talking about.
And just on this note, Lisa, when you say you don't really want to blame your parents or your ancestors, there's a real truth in that. But it's kind of nice to be able to blame something sometimes, Yeah. I'd like to point the finger somewhere. And especially if I can pick, instead of a person, sort of a point in time. And this may or may not make sense, but what I try to blame, or what I try to get people to blame, as they start to understand evolutionary mismatch, we go back to the transition between hunter-gatherers and when we adopted a gregarian culture.
Yeah. As
we became agrarian, we shifted from hunter-gatherers, and that's when all of these things started to come out of balance. And yes. Literally, we can actually look at hunter-gatherer bands today, and there are bands that have actually, specifically Kun, that half of them approximately made the decision to stay hunter-gatherers, and the other half decided to become agrarian. And within a couple of generations, almost all of the modern day dysfunctions, mental illness, obesity, diabetes, balding, dental problems, acne, things that hunter-gatherers just don't have, that these things are clearly a byproduct of evolutionary mismatch. But, and again, it's complex, but all of that evolutionary mismatch is driven by addiction.
Yes.
My eating patterns that are out of balance are driven by addiction. My sleeping patterns that are out of balance are driven by addictions. My relationship patterns that are out of balance are driven by addictions. My exercise patterns that are out of balance are driven by addiction. Yeah. So the addiction drives the evolutionary mismatch in a way that compels us into deeper and deeper dysfunction.
Yep, exactly. So stay tuned, because we will help you learn to rewire your brain out of the fear of loss of a child, but also out of failure. I'm a failure, period. So we'll see you tomorrow.